Hello and welcome tonight. The presiding judge on the trial of Nnamdi Kanu, Justice Binta Nyako, recuses herself from the trial of the IPOB leader in the terrorism charges brought against him by the federal government. Former President Goodluck Jonathan advocates for peaceful political practices in Nigeria's efforts at good governance. The former president says leadership is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. And President Bola Tinubu declined assent to a bill seeking to extend the tenure of the service of legislative officers at the National Assembly, as well as the 36 state houses of assembly from 35 to 40 years and their retirement age from 60 to 65 years.
And on business news, the central bank governor announces plans to inject about 1.4 trillion naira to boost cash flow in the country.
On sports news tonight, Erik ten Hag warns the increasing number of fixture will leave top players facing an almost unavoidable risk of injury as the Red Devils kickstart their Europa League campaign on Wednesday night.
From Abuja, the nation's capital, Nigeria reaffirms its commitment to fostering stronger international partnerships with member states of the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, OACPS, on the sidelines of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly.
And in international news from London, Lebanon's health ministry says at least 558 people have been killed, including 50 children, in Israeli strikes since Monday.
The presiding judge in the trial of Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the indigenous people of Biafra IPOB, Justice Binta Nyako, has recused herself from the trial. Justice Nyako withdrew from the trial after Mr. Kanu made an oral submission accusing her of non-compliance with the orders of the Supreme Court. At the resumed court session today, Mr. Kanu directly told Justice Nyako that he no longer had confidence in her handling of his trial. Our correspondent, Emanuela Ekele, reports.
The detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, arrives Justice Binta Nyako's courtroom for the hearing of a case on alleged terrorism instituted against him by the federal government. He is received by his loved ones in the field courtroom. At the resumed hearing, the counsel to the federal government, Mr. Adegboyega Awomolo, told the court that he was ready for the commencement of trial. However, the counsel to Mr. Kanu, Mr. Aloy Ejimako, tried to persuade the court for an adjournment on the grounds that his client had not been given the opportunity to prepare his defense.
This is judgment of the Supreme Court.
At this point, Mr. Kanu interjected, asking the judge directly to recuse herself from the case as he no longer had confidence in the court because she did not abide by the decision of the Supreme Court.
He made it very clear.
He based his remarks on the Supreme Court's decision, wherein the Apex Court questioned the jurisdiction on where the alleged broadcast he made, which the federal government is charging him on, was made. He added that the refusal of the Department of State Service to obey the court order was understandable, but for the court to refuse to obey an order of the Supreme Court was regrettable. While recusing herself, Justice Binta Nyako says she'll be sending the case file back to the Chief Judge for reassignment and further necessary action. Though the prosecution counsel urged the court to proceed with the trial, Justice Binta Nyako says she was reminded to recuse herself from the case and has done that accordingly. Mr. Kanu and his lawyer give reasons on his decision.
This cherry picking of what was contained in the Supreme Court judgment is what I'm against.
Yes, that's correct.
It should be implemented holistically. Yes. I'm not against facing any trial. After all, I'm innocent, they have not been against me. But there cannot be any trial when key sections of the Constitution and a key Supreme Court judgment has been violated by a court of law.
The court was insisting in the face of all this, especially the injustice of not allowing him his constitutional right to fair hearing, the court was insisting on proceeding to trial. That left our client with no choice than to express his loss of confidence in the impartiality.
The counsels will now wait for the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court to reassign the case. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
Former President Goodluck Jonathan is advocating for peaceful political practices in Nigeria's efforts at good governance. He adds that the battle of politics in Nigeria have become a major security issue and that leadership is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. He stated this during the stakeholders' dialogue in Abuja to commemorate the International Day of Peace.
The International Day of Peace is celebrated annually on September 21 to amplify the voices of peace and unity across the world. Former President Goodluck Jonathan leads the list of dignitaries attending the dialogue and calls for deliberate efforts to secure sustainable peace in Nigeria.
As a country, if we don't change, we politicians don't change our political behavior and embrace that culture that was embedded in us, that it will look as if it's a part of our genetic makeup, one day this country will then go into a conflagration that nobody can control. So we, the politicians, must know that what we do wrongly is wrong. And when we politicians justify evil things and say it is politics, somebody does something that is evil, say it's politics. It's not politics, you're a criminal.
This year's celebration with the theme, Cultivating a Culture of Peace, highlights the necessity of fostering dialogue, unity and reconciliation across communities worldwide. And the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution highlights that in his presentation.
Peace is one intangible thing that people oftentimes downplay, they don't recognize it, they don't appropriate for it. And I use the word that peace is a marginalized subject. I use the word also that peace is an orphan. People enjoy it, but they don't know that they need to invest in it.
His position is echoed by a federal lawmaker who calls for leaders to adopt integrity in the country's development.
Injury to one is an injury to all. And whosoever sponsors crisis as a leader, you are part or you fund or advise people to go into crisis. Remember, the Bible says, and even the Quran says so, whatsoever a man soweth, the same he shall reap.
The Institute calls for increased collaboration to address the underlying causes of conflict, such as poverty, unemployment, and socio-political marginalization.
The President has declined assent to a bill seeking to extend the tenure of the service of legislative officers at the National Assembly, as well as the 36 state houses of assembly from 35 to 40 years and their retirement age from 60 to 65 years. President Bola Tinubu declined assent was conveyed in a letter read on the floor of the upper legislative chamber by the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio. The harmonized retirement age bill was first stepped down in February this year for further research and consultation with stakeholders after a significant number of senators had voted against it. Our National Assembly correspondent Gloria Umezoke reports.
After 8 weeks of recess, lawmakers resume legislative sitting led by the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio. The Senate President launches into the various correspondences from the presidency.
Appointment of Chief Justice of Nigeria. I have the honor to forward the nomination of Honorable Justice Kudirat Motomori Olatokunbo Kekereku, CON, for confirmation as Chief Justice of Nigeria.
Senator Akpabio also announced President Tinubu's refusal to assent to the retirement age bill.
In respect of the harmonized retirement age for the legislative officers of the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria bill, passed by the National Assembly and forwarded to me for assent. Upon thorough examination and careful consideration, I have decided to withhold my assent to the bill. This decision is made in accordance with the powers vested in me by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
The bill, which sought to extend the service years of hundreds of workers who are due to exit the legislative system from 2024, was introduced under the 8th Assembly and has consistently hit the rocks before the current decline. A minute's silence is then held in honor of the late Senator Ifeanyi Ubah.
rest in perfect peace.
In a welcome address, the President of the Senate vowed to focus on the challenge of security while reassuring Nigerians of the Senate's swift response to the current economic hardship.
We want Nigerians to know that their struggles are not lost on this Senate. Our sacred duty as your earnest representatives remain to respond with the urgency and compassion that the current situation deserves. We must, as senators, prioritize the issues of security of our great nation, ensuring that every citizen can walk down any street in this country without fear.
The Senate has adjourned its legislative sitting on the first day of plenary before the stipulated time to mourn a former colleague, Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, who passed late July. On Wednesday, when they reconvene, the lawmakers will consider, among other things, for confirmation, the appointment of Justice Kudirat Kekereekun as the Chief Justice of Nigeria. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
The Nigerian Army has identified 4 challenges of inadequate funding, inadequate manpower, lack of industrial base, and poor understanding of security by Nigerians as factors militating against optimal performance by the service. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tariq Lagbaja, stated this while delivering the 2024 Distinguished Personality Lecture titled The Roles and Contributions of the Nigerian Army to National Development, organized by the Center for Peace and Strategic Studies, University of Ilorin. The Army Chief, who was represented by the Chief of Training, Army, Major General Sani Mohammed, said that the inadequacy in funding is affecting the level of equipment holding of the armed forces, which has a direct bearing on its performance.
There is an erroneous belief that security is to be provided and ensured without interruption only and exclusively by the security agencies, particularly the Nigerian Army, wherever deployed. This has led to apathy on the part of the populace, who feel less concerned except when their safety is directly threatened by activities of antisocial elements. The Nigerian Army, along with other security agencies, is under-resourced. In a country of over 200 million people, it is unrealistic for security agencies totaling around 2 million, including an army of just over 100,000, active personnel without a reserve force to secure the entire population. To address this issue, it is crucial to invest in expanding and strengthening security forces, ensuring they have adequate personnel and resources. The pursuit of national development, which goes along national security, is a costly endeavor as defense policy is a capital intensive. The entire armed forces of Nigeria had a budget of about 2.8 billion in 2023, with additional supplementary of about $1 billion. However, not all the budgetary provisions were eventually released. The inadequacy in funding is affecting the level of equipment holding of the armed forces of Nigeria, which has a direct bearing on its performance.
In part 2 after the break, the CBN raises its monetary policy rate MPR by 50 basis points to 27.25%. We will be joined by the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Bismarck Rewani. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, broadcasting live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Israel and Hezbollah trade waves of strikes a day after Israeli attacks targeting the militant group killed over 500 people across Lebanon. The presiding judge in the trial of Nnamdi Kanu, Justice Binta Nyako, recuses herself from the trial of the IPOB leader and the terrorism charges brought against him by the federal government. Former President Goodluck Jonathan advocates for peaceful political practices in Nigeria's efforts at good governance. The former president says leadership is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. And President Bola Tinubu declines assent to a bill seeking to extend the tenure of the service of legislative officers at the National Assembly, as well as the 36 state houses of assembly from 35 to 40 years and their retirement age from 60 to 65 years. Some investors and markets got a surprise today as the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee hiked interest rates by a surprise 50 basis points to 27.25%. In this next report, our correspondent, Laddie Williams, breaks down the considerations at the second to the last meeting of the year.
Interest rate setting globally, and as a battle to tame inflation continues in most economies, some central bankers are nearing their inflation targets. Back here in Nigeria, after 2 consecutive months of slowing inflation rate, the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee held its 297th meeting.
It's on point at about 2 p.m.
Expectations from experts was that the MPC would pause its aggressive rate hiking cycle. But to the surprise of markets and analysts, the MPC raised lending rates by a jumbo 50 basis points.
The committee was unanimous in its decision to further tighten policy.
With this latest hike in lending rates, the Nigerian economy has experienced 8.5% increase from the 18.75% Mr. Olayemi Cardoso met since assuming the office as central bank governor in September 2023. Since then, inflation rate is up from 26.72% to 32.15% in August 2024.
Between 2015 and 2023, the past 8 years, witnessed an incredible amount of pumping of liquidity into the system. In other words, you had a situation where the response to excess money supply, little foreign exchange available, was to fix exchange rates, okay, which now resulted in multiple exchange rates and arbitrage opportunities between one and the other, okay? And of course, this in itself resulted in a backlog of foreign exchange, because this is where all these things have come from. And sometimes people forget that this is the context in which we came into the saddle of the central bank.
As the cost of borrowing continues to trend up and the fight against inflation intensifies in Nigeria, mixed reactions trail what the impact will be on households and businesses.
Historically, the trend has been hiking, so I was just kind of hopeful that they may take a breather, but hiking because of the underlying fundamentals from the CBN's perch perhaps makes sense.
It's clear that the increase in energy costs is going to cause more inflation. They are trying to hedge that off. As the CBN governor also mentioned, the gains we have seen from reduction in food inflation coming from the harvest season might not be one that holds.
With just one rate-setting meeting left in 2024, it's a wait-and-see game now, as some say Nigeria might not be out of the woods yet when it comes to taming stubborn inflation. Laddie Williams, reporting for Channels Television News.
All right, for more on the CBN's Monetary Policy Committee, which has hiked its interest rates by a surprise 50 basis points to 27.25% at its meeting today, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Mr. Bismarck Rwandi, to help us analyze this latest development and what it actually means for millions of Nigerians. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Rwandi.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so we're back at it again.
Yes.
And it appears inflation is still the big issue that we're still talking about. What can you tell us from this latest
development? First and foremost, there's 100 days left this year, 100 days more this year. So this is decisions that were made today and the impact will have on every Nigerian for the next 100 days until we get to 2025. That's important. All of us, most of us, thought that at best the central bank will maintain status quo because there were 2 hikes before now, and that let's wait and see the impact of those policies on people. But they took us by surprise. I think it was audacious, it was bold, and they probably have more information than we do, naturally. But the important thing here is that this decision, in the last 48 months, they've raised interest rates 13 times.
13 times interest rates have been raised.
Interest rates have been raised. 9 times they've maintained status quo, and once they've reduced it. And that's in the last 4 years. But ever since Yemi Cardoso's team came in October last year, they were studying the lay of the land, and then by February this year, they started moving. Cumulatively, they've increased interest rates by 8.5% per annum, right? From 18.75 to 27.25. This is significant, right? And we thought that basically because the rest of the world was slowing down and easing, they would take their time. But look at what has happened. Apart from increasing the monetary policy rate, they also increased the cash reserve ratio from 45 to 50%, and for merchant banks to 16%. What it does mean is that for every 100 naira you take to the bank as a deposit, the central bank will take 50 naira of that and sterilize that as zero. So the bank will have to lend you 50%, lend 50 naira of the 100 naira they take, to pay you on your 100 naira. Basically, they have actually mopped up liquidity quite aggressively. Not only that, with this new rate, the asymmetric corridor means that for the banks to borrow from the central bank, they'll be borrowing at about 32%, and effective on-lending rate at 36% per annum. So what does that mean? It means that for a small businessman, you have to depend on friends and relatives. You have to depend on sisters, brothers, and, But what we said here, inflation is the cocoa of the matter. That's the real thing. So, and he said, look, no country in this world can alleviate poverty and can grow if inflation rates are at this level. So what he did was to make those moves. When you look at the inflation trend, all the way from January 24, it started declining, but we expect this to now start moving. Inflation will rise in October after the petrol price increase.
Yet again?
Yes, it will rise again, because the petrol price you are seeing at 900 naira is not the final, that's not the final destination. There's some room to go. Minimum wage effective July. So core inflation needs drastic measures. Core inflation is structural, while transient inflation and transitory inflation is, transitory. So what he said is that I'm taking a look at core inflation to deal with it, but it takes longer to moderate. However, there's a limitation to how much monetary policy can do, because this economy has fiscal dominance. So what are the root causes of inflation in a country? In this country, in particular, exchange rate pass-through. Every time the exchange rate moves, people pass it on to prices. The price of diesel today is about 1,180 naira per liter. Money supply growth is about 61.94%. Typically, it should be about 15%. And then the global inflation effect. Now, global inflation is beginning to decline. So that's what it looks like. But like we say, inflation anywhere is inflation everywhere. So look at, in the US, inflation is down to 2.5%, was as high as 11%. In the UK, it's down to 2.2%, was as high as 10%. And the European Union is down to 2.2%. What has the US done? The US has cut by 50 basis points. They've cut their interest rates. The Bank of England has cut rate by 25 basis points to 5% and left it. The European Central Bank has done the same. So the trend, going with the flow, rates are coming down. However, every country has its own peculiarity. What impact will it have on you? Today, this is what's happening. The price of a bag of rice, imported rice, is 100,000 naira. It was 85,000 naira about 2 weeks ago. In July, it was 84. It's now 100,000 naira. It's up by 19%. Wheat flour is now 70,000 naira. It was down at 59,000. It's up by 18%. Beans is the big culprit. Beans is now 180,000 naira per bag. It's up 20%. And this crate of eggs, depending on the size of the eggs, these are big eggs, 6,000 naira. And Indomie is now 8,000 naira. This is what it looks like today. But in 4 weeks or 5 weeks from now, when the duty-free imports arrive, hopefully it's not cornered. We think that a bag of rice will go down from 100,000 to 89,000, right? We think that a bag of wheat flour will go down to 65 from 70. Beans will go down to about 160,000. And the eggs will go down to 5,000. Indomie about 7,500. Okay, so maybe. Right?
Because I know quite a lot of people might still not be able to.
This is the big elephant in the room. What's happening to the Naira? Today, the first thing happened, the Naira went to 1685, almost 1,700. Very sharply. Because maybe speculation and all of that. But the central bank, to deal with this question of falling Naira, has to come up with an intentional program of auction. That is, even if you announce that you're going to have the auction once a month, once in 2 weeks, once in, right? But there must be a program. That way people now know, and we think when they announce that, hopefully, the Naira begins to appreciate towards 1550, and then probably appreciate to 1500 by December. But that's it, you can see that. Now, impact on corporates today, after the stock market, after this information, by tomorrow, we think the stock market begins to fall because there's an inverse relationship between stock prices and interest rates. The cost of borrowing at 35% per annum, you can imagine that it will be expensive, and it will increase the non-performing loans of banks significantly to about 4.5%. But GDP will still will echo out growth of about 2.8% from the current 3.19%.
All right, so Minister Anika, because we're really running out of time, but what next? What next?
What next? No? International school fees, because the exchange rate is going to impact you. Airline travel fares will come down because the Naira begins to appreciate, and cost of medical tourism. Next slide. Now, this is where it matters. A trip from Abalende to Victoria Island is up by 67%, and that's going to go high. Your house rent, wherever you are, will go up by at least 20%. Medicines in the drugstores will go up by 100%, and your school fees will go up by 40%, increasing dropout rate, and utilities will be up. Finally, this is what next. Petrol prices will go, we think, to 1,200 per litre. The question about that. Imported goods expected to come in. Minimum wage arrears will be paid. Naira will appreciate by 12% to this. Cocoa revenue will be up because it's now $8,000 per ton. Higher inflation in October, diaspora bond flows. Now, finally, what Christmas? Cash is king. If you have money, you'll have cheers Christmas.
You're on the right track. But if there's no money,
cheers.
Oh dear.
So, 100 days to go.
100 days to go, but we still keep our fingers crossed. Mr. Bismarck-Rwanda, thank you so much for your thoughts and your analysis there.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the news at 10. CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso announces plans to inject about 1.4 trillion naira to boost cash flow in the country. Well, that will be on our business news. Please join us again. Welcome back. Let's now head to the nation's capital, where Markwe Ogun Yusuf is standing by to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Over to you, Markwe.
Hello, Ayo. We're starting off in America, where the UN General Assembly is currently ongoing. Nigeria's efforts towards strengthening mortgage refinancing and women's empowerment has received the support of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce with a commitment of about $320 million. At the U.S.-Nigeria Executive Business Roundtable hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Nisha Biswal of the American International Development Finance Corporation also announced it was investing $200 million in mortgage refinancing in Nigeria. The sum of $100 million has been earmarked to finance SMEs in Nigeria with particular interest in women empowerment, even as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce also announced that $20 million has been approved for a firm, Robust International, for processing of cashew nuts in Nigeria. At the event, which took place on the sidelines of the 79th session of the ongoing UN General Assembly, Vice President Kashim Shettima reiterated President Tinubu's commitment to investor-friendly policies. The Vice President is expected to deliver President Tinubu's national statement at the general debate of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday and also meet with the Secretary General of the United Nations. Meanwhile, most Nigerian state governors are presently in New York to shop for investment for various states on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. One of them is the governor of Niger State, Mohammed Bago, who believes that Nigeria and his state should be able to tap from the huge resources in the carbon market. He spoke today with our correspondent, Juliana Olayinka, covering the global event.
A lot of resources, over $8 trillion is there in the carbon market, in the climate change. Africa is not in perspective, and so we are basically doing a conservation instead. So there's need for Africa, to be given opportunity to, tap from these resources that are available, because the emission is not from Africa mostly. These emissions are from the West and Americas. So we should be the people to balance the ecosystem for their emissions, instead of the other way around. Again, on the issues of the effects of climate change, you can see the amount of flooding happening in Africa. You can see the planting season that has, changed, completely. Not for our fault, fault of ours mostly, for the fault of these great people, the great countries around the world. So the conversation around helping Africa, it shouldn't be like that. It should be Africa putting their demand on the table to say, okay, this is what we stand, to protect. If not, we'll bring down all our trees.
Staying with events on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, has called on development partners to assist Nigeria to roll out climate-friendly school meal programs. She stated this at the roundtable lunch organized by the Organization of African First Ladies for Development, OFLAD, in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation on the sideline of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly. Acknowledging the potential of the school feeding program to encourage enrollment in schools as well as promote nutrition among students, the First Lady said the program is under review in Nigeria. As contained in the statement by the media aide of the First Lady, Senator Tinubu emphasized that Nigeria, with its surging population and climatic challenges, needs all the help she can get to ensure a sustainable rollout. Well, away from hunger and back home, Governor Umar Namadi of Jigawa State is expressing confidence in his ability to deliver transformational changes, development, and prioritize accountability in public office to the citizens of Jigawa State. The governor disclosed this during the 8-year celebration of governance reform work on the Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn in Nigeria, which held here in Abuja. The partnership is a public sector accountability and governance program funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom.
Governor Umar Namadi of Jigawa State leads dignitaries, including the Special Advisor to the President on Policy and Coordination, to celebrate 8 years of governance reform work in Nigeria by the Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn. The partnership showcases the achievements of the 5-year program, especially in governance reform in the country.
In Kano, in Kaduna and Jigawa, citizen participation in how public resources are allocated is now the norm. And that is not an exception, and that is because of this partnership. 2 out of the 3 FCDO-focused states are rated as the most transparent states by the Nigerian Subnational Budget Transparency Survey, bit of a mouthful.
The panel discussions focus on areas of possible reforms.
The notion of isolation of citizens is what we need to consciously recognize and consciously engage. So this administration is keen to ensure the trust of owning that citizens got us here. And citizens must be part of what we're doing in governance, and citizens must be able to comment on what we're doing, and we must be able to take the contributions of citizens as we seek to improve the delivery of the mandate that has been given to us.
If we're going to even then have these budgetary reforms sit on a proper framework, so we've got to look at our constitution. The constitutional provisions regarding budgets in Nigeria are very vague.
The partnership is working in 7 locations across the country, and Jigawa State is one of the partnering states. The governor shares the story of the program's impact in the state.
Jigawa State, during the Civitas World Bank program, won the 2nd position in the whole country. And this is exactly because of the financial and public management reforms that were instituted by FAL in Jigawa State. And again, at the same time, Jigawa State has been #1 in ICANN Accountability Index, have been second. So, and these are all due to the reforms initiatives that were introduced by FAL and were sustained by the state government.
We focus on providing support to critical areas that defines how government work.
Through its partnerships, the program is committed to improving the lives of people in Nigeria with a special focus on governance, youth, and other marginalized groups.
Staying with development, the MTN Foundation has disbursed over 114 million naira in scholarships to 380 students, including visually impaired students across Nigerian universities this year. The foundation has also inducted 380 graduates into the MTN Scholarship Alumni Association. The director of the MTN Foundation, Mrs. Aishatu Sadauki, disclosed this at the award ceremony and alumni induction here in Abuja.
The MTN Scholarship Program, established in 2010, recognizes and rewards eligible high-performing students in Nigerian public tertiary institutions. The program has 3 categories: MTN Science and Technology Scholarship, MTN Scholarship for Blind Students, and Top 10 UTME Scholarship. The event witnessed the graduation of 380 scholars of the MTN Scholarship Program. Some alumni and previous awardees were present to testify to the life-changing experience of the scholarship. The director of the MTN Foundation, Mrs. Aishatu Sadauki, in her remarks spoke on the impact of this scholarship.
For the last 18 years, our foundation has been driven by this thought and the belief that every individual, regardless of their backgrounds or socioeconomic status, can be a trailblazer, problem solver, and visionary.
We are proud to associate with MTN Nigeria Foundation on this noble endeavor. Our partnership is a testament to what can be achieved when forward-thinking organizations are united towards a common cause for society, for societal good through education.
Then came the presentation of the awards. The director of the MTN Foundation then gave a word of charge to the scholars.
To our current students, you have shown that obstacles are not roadblocks, but detours that lead to greatness. You are now forebearers and older siblings. Learn from our outgoing scholars and lend a helping hand to our incoming scholars.
Some of the beneficiaries expressed their thoughts.
The award is actually of huge amount of money to me because it's worth about 300,000 naira. And then I intend to use this award exactly to pay my tuition fee and also my accommodation.
The annual award amount has increased from 200,000 to 300,000 naira. The foundation has awarded 13,717 scholarships over the last 13 years.
And that's all from our Abuja studios. Willie Wong is on standby now for business news.
Thank you, Maokwe. Now, the governor of the central bank, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, has announced plans to inject about 1.4 trillion naira to boost cash flow in the country. And Mr. Cardoso says the move will be backed by strict monitoring on all deposit money banks to ensure compliance for easy withdrawals at ATM points. The Apex Bank governor, who was responding to questions after the Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja today, explains that total cash flow in the country is about 4 trillion naira. Now we head to the domestic stock market, which sustained bullish sentiments for the second day following the interest rate hike by the central bank. Ini John Mekwa has the details.
Good
evening, everyone. Welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, on a day when CBN's MPC hiked interest rates by 50 basis points to 27.25, we saw the market surging, gained 104 billion naira. We cannot say that is as a reaction to that announcement, because that announcement was made just some minutes before the close of trade. I guess we'll see the impact and in tomorrow's trade. But today, the market went up to 56.64 trillion naira. All-share index 0.18% in the green and still building on the 98,000 level. The figures were on full blast today. All of them, they did so well. FBN Holding, UBA, GTCO, Axisco, Zenith Bank. I mean, a lot of cherry picking and buying interest showing right there. But looking at the sectors, consumers didn't do so good. Consumers good. Dangote Sugar, Flour Mill, Honeywell, they were on the flip side today, bringing that counter down 0.28%. Oil and gas is still in the red. Japan Gold, O&O. After so long of gains, we see profit taking is the title of what's going on around there. But banking, obviously, because of the full gas. Look at it, 3.01% in the green. So it's MPC decision day, and the market did win with the bull.
And that's it on business. It's back to you, Ayotunde, for the rest of the news at 10.
Many thanks, Will. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says his country will continue hitting Hezbollah targets in Lebanon until the goal of ensuring the safe return of Israel's northern residents to their homes is achieved. Well, this comes as Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade waves of strikes a day after Israeli attacks targeting the militant group, which killed over 500 people across Lebanon. Here's Simon Puzzi with other international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 558 people have now been killed, including 50 children, in Israeli strikes since Monday. Thousands of people are fleeing southern Lebanon, with families crammed into cars and gridlocked traffic on the road to the capital Beirut. Monday was the deadliest day in Lebanon since the end of the civil war in 1990. Cross-border attacks between Israel and Hezbollah have continued, with schools on both sides of the border closed and some in Lebanon used as makeshift shelters. Israel says it aims to remove the threat from Hezbollah and return displaced residents to northern Israel. Hezbollah says it is resisting Israeli aggression and acting in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Here, dashcam footage captured of a rocket falling onto an Israeli highway in the northern city of Tamra.
The catastrophe continues, and escalation in Lebanon is extremely dangerous and worrying. I was in Lebanon some days before, just before the explosion of these electronic devices has been creating terror among the Lebanese population. Escalation is extremely dangerous and worrying. I can say that we are almost in a full-fledged war.
We should all be alarmed by the escalation. Lebanon is at the brink. The people of Lebanon, the people of Israel, and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. Civilians are paying the price in rising death tolls and shattered lives and communities.
A court filing shows the suspected gunman arrested near Donald Trump's golf course wrote a note months earlier saying he intended to kill the former president. The letter, which begins, "Dear World, this was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump," was found in a box handed over by an unidentified civilian witness that also included ammunition, a metal pipe and 4 phones.
Keep walking!
Prosecutors say they will try to charge 58-year-old Ryan Routh with the attempted assassination of a major political candidate. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the war with Russia could end sooner than people think. Speaking to US broadcaster ABC News, Zelensky said that the victory plan he will present to US President Joe Biden this week will require Ukraine's allies to strengthen the Ukrainian army. Mr. Zelensky said the plan is not about negotiating with Russia, but rather it is a bridge to a diplomatic way out to stop the war. 2 people are missing after torrential rain hit the Tuscany region of Italy, causing rivers to break their banks. According to the Italian Fire Brigade, searches have been underway since last night for a 5-month-old child and his grandmother. Here, eyewitness footage of a flash flooding triggered by heavy rains on the streets of Antibes in France. And here, drone footage of a German village on the Polish border bracing for further floodwaters. At least 17 people have died this month from Romania to Poland in the worst flooding to affect Central Europe in 2 decades. China's central bank has unveiled a major package of measures aimed at reviving the country's flagging economy. People's Bank of China Governor Pan Gongshen announced plans to lower borrowing costs and allow banks to increase their lending. The move comes after a series of disappointing data, which increased expectations in recent months that the world's second-largest economy will miss its own 5% growth target this year. Stock markets in Asia jumped after Mr. Pan's announcement. And the Chilean wingsuit flyer Sebastian Alvarez has combined 2 of his favorite hobbies, skydiving and surfing, to perform a world-first skydive-to-surf jump above Abu Dhabi's Hudurat Island. The Chilean soared up above the Emirati capital on a Bell 212 helicopter before jumping out at 12,000 feet. This amazing footage was released days ahead of the Surf Abu Dhabi facility hosting its first professional surfing competition, the Abu Dhabi Longboard Classic. Alvarez said he comes from a surfing family and had always wanted to combine his passion for skydiving and surfing together. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. Enyimba International will host Lobby Stars of Makurdi on Wednesday in a rescheduled March Day 2 2024-25 Nigeria Premier Football League clash. The People's Elephants have played a game this season owing to continental engagement, while Lobby have picked up points from 2 games. In Lagos, Ikorodu City will host defending champions Rangers International at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena, Onikon. And Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag has joined the growing list of managers and players criticizing expanded European events and next summer's extended Club World Cup. Ten Hag warns the increasing number of fixtures will leave top players facing an almost unavoidable risk of injury as the Red Devils head into their opening game of the new-look Europa League against Twente on Wednesday night. Christopher Nkunku scored a hat-trick as Chelsea eased into the 4th round of the Carabao Cup by thumping Barrow 5-0. Manchester City edged Watford 2-1. Leicester City beat 4th league side Warsaw 3-0 on penalties after both sides played a goalless draw. Aston Villa also advanced thanks to a 2-1 win against Wycombe Wanderers. And Barcelona coach Hansi Flick backs reserve goalkeeper Iñaki Pina to replace stricken teammate Marc-André ter Stegen, but also says the club must discuss if they will sign a replacement. Germany international ter Stegen was taken off with a ruptured knee tendon against Villarreal on Sunday, as is likely to miss the rest of the season after undergoing surgery. That sports is back to you, Ayo.
Thank you so much, Chris. And the main news again. Israel said it has killed a top commander with Hezbollah's missile and rocket unit today as the Israeli military traded fire with Hezbollah again, bringing the death toll from a massive Israeli bombing campaign to nearly 560 people. And the presiding judge on the trial of Nnamdi Kanu, Justice Binta Nyako, has recused herself from the trial of the IPOB leader in the terrorism charges brought against him by the federal government. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ayo Tunde Balogun. From all of us here is good night and please stay safe.